what if the pyramids are a remnant that was either unintentionally or intentionally left over as a vestige from the antediluvian world?
What's up, man? Is there something underneath the pyramids? Hmm?
I
There's
think
something
so.
underneath the pyramids?
Well, so apparently it's a bunch of what like so apparently it's a whole bunch of tunnels, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
something
and
like
and
that.
they all kind of seem to like wrap around in helixes
It's
Hmm.
not, I thought it's
going
not
down.
tunnels. It's actual structures that go 2 kilometers down underneath the earth. And they've
Right.
got little wires or structures
Yeah,
that connect
coils or something.
coils or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but the shape looks sort of like DNA almost, doesn't it?
Mm,
You trying to add things that aren't there, man.
Here.
yeah, I think they more look like some kind of tubular, you know, whatever with like these coils that go around them.
Mhm.
Yes.
You know
Yep.
what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yep. I just pulled it up. Yeah. They're like a whole bunch of tubes
Hmm.
that have. Yeah. It looks like Yeah. It looks like tubes have coils wrapped around them.
Yeah, like shock springs or something on a car.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that kind of throws out the whole theory that the pyramids were built as as death memorials or whatever to the pharaohs.
Yeah.
Man, Renee Girard,
Maybe
man,
they were repurposed for
wrong,
that
brother.
purpose, right? Later on, you know?
They could have been, but at the same time, what would the evidence be? Because the in Egypt they have the Valley of the Kings where all the pharaohs and stuff are buried. So wouldn't it make sense that the Valley of the Kings would be right there amongst the pyramids if that's what they were, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Well,
Which
the other thing here, man, let's think about this, okay? So let's get into this. Okay, first of all, my thing is you got to think about the pyramids that they're showing with the whatever was underneath. Okay, what pyramids came before those pyramids? You got the step pyramid, right?
Mhm.
That is kind of like, you know what I mean, stacked on each other.
Are you talking about the one at the Kofu
Something like that.
one
Yeah,
in Egypt?
Khufu.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, Khufu or Kofu or something.
yeah. And then you got the what's that pyramid? That's like crooked. It's a crooked pyramid, you
Mhm.
know?
Yes, that's way older. At least they think it's way older than the pyramids at Giza, right?
Exactly, right? Okay. Now before the step pyramids, you got the ancient Egyptians putting stones on top of their like the dead, okay?
Hmm.
And on top of that, if you look at other Afro-Asiatic cultures, they do similar things. They would put stones on top of uh, burial sites where their dead was. The ancient Israelites did this. The Canaanites did this. You know what I'm saying? The Israelites did that, right? When they buried Moses, when they buried the prophets, they would put stones on top of, heaps of stones on top of their dead. So I think, it, if I had to assume, I would say this is probably a very ancient practice that a lot of the Afro-Asiatic peoples probably would have carried out around their dead. And the ancient Egyptians are an Afro-Asiatic speaking people. just like the Semites, just like the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, all those, Ethiopians, Arabs, right? So to me, I think it's sort of an evolution from something that is kind of pre, uh, what is it, pre-dynastic Egypt, you know? That's my thought. And I think I still would go with the Girardian view that they're memorials to the dead. Now, as far as violence and everything, you know, I'm not sure, but I do think that they're memorials to the dead. And, perhaps the coils or something like that might have been, maybe that's a later thing. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Now, let's get kind of crazy here. What if the pyramids are a remnant that was either unintentionally or intentionally left over as a vestige from the antediluvian world from before the flood?
You mean like Atlantis and stuff?
Yeah, something like that. Because remember, after all, at least according to Plato, and there are people that go back and forth and argue whether Plato's story is kind of like metaphorical or not. But Plato says that he originally got the Atlantis story from his grandfather, who was Solon, who had traveled to Egypt and spoke with Egyptian priests, who passed the story of Atlantis on to him, who ended up passing the story. And Solon, he returned to Athens, eventually passed on the Atlantis story to Plato. Now, a lot of people there are different camps in interpreting that. Some people will say that
Yeah.
Plato that the whole Atlantis story was all a big metaphorical cautionary tale that Plato was full of symbol and allegory and everything. But most people suspect though that it was not. That 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 at least that Plato is trying to communicate something that was communicated to him, something that had been handed on to him as if it were absolute fact.
Hmm.
So if those pyramids are antediluvian, originating from before the flood or prior to some big global cataclysm, what was their purpose originally?
Yeah.
Were they left as like a giant black box of knowledge or technology or something, or would they have been left over, or was it something that was kind of unintentionally left over, that was just a massive structure that was able to be submerged by lots of water, and then when the water receded, you know the pyramids were just left as if they were a canyon or a mountain or a hill or something.
Now, uh, 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 one of those Egyptian followers, the followers of ancient Egyptian religion, Shane, would say, "Hey, man, you just trying to discredit the fact that the pyramids created by the ancient Egyptians who were African.
Hmm.
That's just an attempt to get away from the fact that the Egyptians were African."
Hmm.
Well, what if the way they understood themselves was as like keepers of a secret knowledge, you know, which as well as I do that in the ancient world there was a tendency for there to be a lot of little like little like what you would call mystery cults, where the entire reason for the mystery cult existence was to keep a secret or secrets,
Yeah.
and the secrets would only be passed on to the initiated. So kind of referring back to Plato, the assumption here would be that somehow his grandfather Solon, in order for the secret of Atlantis to be passed on to him, Solon was probably initiated into a mystery cult of the Egyptian priests.
Mm.
And the thing is, so I'm just throwing all this out there.
Yeah, yeah.
So this could all be bunk, or this could all be, or there could be something here. And that's the really interesting thing, is that when we were all growing up, there was so much certainty regarding the pyramids. That the Egyptians definitely built them, that the pyramids were definitely burial chambers for the political leaders of Egypt. The way that they always want to make Egypt sound is they always want to make it sound like it was this nation that had a really that had a very, very strong political system, a very, very strong political government. They hadn't developed separation of church and state yet. That would end up coming later with America. Yeah, but um that that they were this like political powerhouse, and because they had so much reverence for their pharaohs and everything, they would build these great structures. But yet the physical evidence that archaeologists today are able to find of pharaohs being buried is nowhere near Giza, or it is nowhere near the Giza pyramids. I mean, near the Giza pyramids, but not amongst them. It's over in what they call the Valley of the Kings. That's where all the pharaohs were buried. So the thing is, when they're trying to say that the pyramids are burial chambers, but there are no bodies buried in them. In fact, I don't even think there are any artifacts inside of them. Then
Wasn't
that kind of blows up that entire story.
wasn't
That whole
Tutankhamun
narrative.
wasn't Tutankhamun's buried? Where was Tutankhamun's burial found? In the Valley of the
The
King?
the Valley of the Kings. Yep.
Okay, okay. That's it.
If you want to know where the pharaohs from the I always get the lower kingdom and upper kingdom mixed up.
Yeah, the
Uh,
Upper Kingdom is south. The Lower Kingdom is in north.
okay, so
Yeah.
if you want to find like if you want to know where a pharaoh in the lower kingdom is buried, then you would go to the Valley of the Kings, and then I believe there is another Valley of the Kings that's down somewhere upriver, which would be south, right?
Hmm. Yep.
So
Well,
the thing is, if that's where all the actual burial chambers are for the pharaohs, then what in the world are the pyramids? You know,
yeah. That's an interesting question. It's an interesting question.
and actually, I kind of find the whole pyramid question a lot more interesting than I find like the UFO question.
Did you see that image I just sent you there? It shows you the scale of this new discovery from this tomography.
The scale of the
Yes.
newly discovered underground structures beneath the pyramids in Egypt is mind-boggling. You have to click to see it all.
Mm.
Wow.
And this was done by
Check this out.
what, Italian archaeologists,
You see
or
that? That thing's big.
yeah, they were Italian and German archaeologists that discovered that, right? And it was using some type of like an MRI X-ray type of technology, or sonar or something, where they were able to see like the shape of everything down there without having to dig.
Yeah, they did some tomography, I think it was.
Yeah, yep. Well, and another interesting thing is what in the world is underneath the Sphinx, too.
The what?
The Sphinx,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
there
tomography. Recent tomography scans reveal that this whole thing is like 2 kilometers underneath the earth potentially. There's nothing in recent current events that we know of on the Mickey Mouse history that we've been given that would suggest that that's technology that they had in 6,000 or 7,000 BC or anything, 4,000 BC, right?
yeah.
One of
You
these
know,
pyramids alleged to have been constructed.
I don't know when.
Yeah,
alleged to be
they
constructed.
didn't
I
have the ability to dig down there and make those giant structures like that. 2 kilometers underneath the earth, Shannon. Nobody had that.
Well, here's the thing, man. I think this whole thing, for me, leads to the idea that pre-Christian civilizations had certain technology
Yeah.
that, you know, uh, that we're not privy to, or something
Mm.
like that, right? And even Christians have uh, sort of become entertained or maybe convinced that the ancient Egyptians had some sort of, knowledge of the sort of technology that we have today,
Hmm.
because essentially I think what they're calling these coils and everything are some kind of vibrational tool, you know what I mean, to tap into energy,
yeah,
tap into electricity, right? So, my thing is, okay, if they were
I wouldn't
able to
be
tap
I
into,
wouldn't be surprised if somebody thought that they could place a couple pharaohs that were honored in the power plant and maybe light them things up that they'd be eternal or something in the spirit world, Shane. Because magnetism and
that's true.
spiritual energy were all interconnected, in some sense, in terms of their
yeah,
belief.
that's Frankenstein come early, bro.
Hmm.
We
Mm.
want to, we want to, you know what I mean? Let set them coils up and we can, it is alive.
Yeah.
It is alive. Yeah. So, you know, I don't know, man. I feel like I shouldn't say I feel. I think that it's essentially it could be a way to sort of get away from the fact that the Gospels and Christ opened up the door for us to, you know, uh what is it? Stop burning witches.
Yeah.
You know, but then again, the idea that, there was, a mass flood and that, all this information that was there before or whatever was wiped away. But the thing I would say to that is that, see, a lot of people, when they think about the Egyptians, they think of them as being this very spiritual and very, very high-minded civilization.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean to say, they think of them as being very civilized, right? That they didn't enact violence except for like warfare, you
Hmm.
know. Okay, but when you look at pre-dynastic Egypt, what you see that the ancient Egyptians actually did sacrifice humans
Hmm.
when they would bury their kings. So they would, and they
Oh,
what they call that is retainer's sacrifice
Yeah, I
or
remember that.
retainer sacrifice, right? So these are the Chinese would do this too. They would, in the ancient periods, right? When they would bury the king or the emperor, they would bury, humans in there in the tomb, right? Because they didn't, like you were talking about, Shane, they didn't want the secrets to come out, right? So they would bury them in there with the alive. Okay, now this is in China, but in Egypt, they would kill them, they would sacrifice them and then throw
mhm.
them in the grave with the emperor or with the pharaoh, right? So, you know, I'm not saying that ancient Egypt is not didn't have, you know, uh great knowledge in art and medicine and stuff like that. I mean, I think they were, a knowledgeable people. Um, but they were also, they engaged in sacrifice and you know, violence too. There's another thing that people think that, this new narrative that like the ancient Egyptians didn't have slaves, right? And that's to counter the whole narrative of the Bible, right? In Exodus, when they talk about, that the ancient Israelites were slaves in the land of Egypt. But the thing is that the Egyptians did have slaves, and they called them speaking tools. So,
Hmm.
in other words, they, they were speaking, they would speak, and I think this is what it is that the pharaohs didn't talk to the public. They would speak through another person. And there are other cultures that do this,
Mhm.
right? They have people who speak to commoners, right? Because the king or the pharaoh or the emperor is too high to speak directly to the people, right? His voice is so holy or, you know, godlike that uh it wouldn't be efficient, or um it would be sort of impure for the king or the pharaoh or something like that to speak to his people directly, right? So, you know, yeah, I
Is
mean,
that what Joseph was? He was like a speaker for Pharaoh as an economic
he,
advisor.
I'm not sure. I mean,
Mm.
he was the one who interpreted dreams, for the
Yep.
pharaoh, right? That's, I mean, we're talking about his name, the name that he was given by the pharaoh,
Mhm.
Zaphnath-Paneah, the revealer of dreams, is the revealer of secrets, right? So perhaps he could have been, you know. And Egypt always, I think, in ancient Egypt, they always had sort of a vizier or a vice lord. I mean, sorry, is it a vice lord? Is that what you call somebody who's like in the place of a king? I don't know.
Oh, a viceroy,
Viceroy,
right?
sorry, viceroy. A viceroy that would, you know, be over officiate, politically over the kingdom.
Mhm.
So, and I think that whole position started with the Egyptians. They were the ones who originated that whole role, a viceroy. So, yeah, I mean, I'm
Well,
not sure.
the interesting thing about these structures underneath the pyramids, and even really the pyramids themselves, when you when we get beyond looking at it, like uh, when historians and archaeologists go beyond just the written record, and they start really examining the pyramids, and they start examining these structures underneath them and everything, and they start asking, well, okay, so we're going to set the written record aside, and we can use the written record to we can use that as a reference point, we can use that to kind of fill in the gaps, but what we're going to look at this from a different angle. What we're going to do is we're going to bring in a whole bunch of engineers, and we're going to have them look at these pyramids and explain to us, if they were going to build them today, how would they do it? Or if they were going to build structures underneath these pyramids today before building the actual pyramids above the surface level, how would they go about doing it? And the thing is, in a lot of these cases, we don't even have the technology to construct things like the pyramids. Now, there are certain ways that certain aspects of them could be built, but
Mhm.
there are things that we do not have the types of cranes and things. Um, as advanced as our technology is today, we don't have the tech that would be required in order to build out the pyramids of Giza.
You're talking about even
So
if you don't even include the stuff underneath, allegedly.
right,
That stuff underneath just blows it out of the water. I don't think
right,
anybody had that. I
Yeah.
mean,
yeah.
And that's the other thing. Okay, think about this though.
2 kilometers
Well,
down the
think about this. Think about this, man. Think about this for real.
earth.
If okay, if you have technology like that, right? And everything. You got these, you know, mega structures underneath all this sand and stuff. You know what I mean? Okay. So just stay with me here because I'm trying to get somewhere. If you got a mega structure like that underneath the pyramids, okay, if you talk about written language, right? You talk about
Hmm.
writing, right? Well, all of our modern day and even ancient script, except for those that are found in the Far East, like China,
Mhm.
derive from hieroglyphics.
Mm.
Okay. So that's Latin script, the scripts that were written uh, with the Vikings and the Scandinavians. That's other Semitic speaking groups, scripts. So Hebrew, Arabic, Phoenician, right? That's even all the way to India, the Brahmic script, which the ancient the Khmer Empire used, Cambodians, the Brahmins in India, the all the scripts except for those found in China derive from hieroglyphics. So what I'm saying is that if that if that information and that whatever was transmitted to all these other groups, then why wouldn't something like this be transmitted as well? You know, a mega structure like that would have had to have some kind of, you know what I mean? Because here's the thing, and I'm saying it because somebody might say, well, okay, but that was secret knowledge. They were trying to hide that, right?
Hmm.
Okay, but here's the thing. The ancient Egyptians had an exclusive thing about writing too. Writing was exclusively done by scribes
Mhm.
and priests. So they monopolized writing too because they thought that writing came from the gods, specifically from the god Thoth, who's the ibis-headed god, right? The god of writing. So they held on to this idea of writing as being exclusive to the upper echelons or the upper crust of society. See what I'm saying? And they passed
Hmm.
that down to the noble families, that their sons would become scribes and priests. So, my thing is if you're going to exclude the building of the pyramids and everything underneath, these mega structures underneath, then wouldn't you also wouldn't you consider that writing to be exclusive too? Does that make sense what I'm saying? I think, I'm trying to, because I mean, I don't understand how you would have, writing would be transmitted, but not something like this. I mean, and that's a pretty big structure underneath to be hiding something, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just,
Well,
yeah,
and what I mean, I guess in my mind, what that kind of goes to, what that would support would be the idea that I mean, possibly when the Egyptians started writing about the pyramids, maybe they didn't know about the structure underneath. You
yeah,
know,
mhm, mhm,
that maybe the structure underneath, maybe what we're seeing as far as the above ground pyramids, maybe that's the insignificant part of the pyramid structure. Maybe the significant part of the pyramids that actually mean that truly means something, that is the real game changer in terms of archaeology, history, anthropology, all that kind of stuff. Maybe it's everything that's underneath the pyramids.
yeah,
And I don't think the Egyptian government will allow us to go down there. There's that Egyptian archaeologist who's the head of the
Lahi Hawass,
yes, yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
and he is very militant about that the Egyptians built the pyramids, and he has faith. He believes they did.
yeah,
And then the minute that someone discredits some method of building the pyramids that he subscribes to, because
Mhm.
originally the whole thing was originally, I believe what his argument was that that to build any kind of a structure like the pyramids, it's just a question of number of slaves. Like
Mhm.
that like that what 1,000 slaves can't build, 2,000 slaves can build, and what 2,000 slaves can't build, 5,000 slaves can build, and so on and so on and so on. So theoretically, if you wanted to build like a tower to the moon, all you would need to do is just go and enslave a whole bunch of people, like in the millions. Then you just put them all in a project and you force them to build something. Well, the thing is, when you're disconnected from reality and you're able to just exist in the hypothetical world of the mind, maybe that works as a thought exercise. But when you're actually thinking about the ground level, that doesn't work, because the thing is, first of all, when you're dealing with slaves, you're dealing with people that that are that are going to be pissed off, to a certain degree, and rightfully so. You're not going to be getting the best, if you're trying to. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're trying to build something very, very complex, you have to have the people that are actually building it have to believe in it.
Mhm.
They have to think it's good work.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, they have to either think it's religiously significant, or they have to think that it's like a vocational thing, or they have to think that there's a profit incentive. They have to believe that what they're doing is good work. There's only so, and at the end of the day, I think that was the upper limit on pagan civilizations. Is pagan civilizations were built entirely on slave labor. you
Mhm.
know you know
Yeah, I
you
mean
know
they do argue, some Egyptologists argue, and this is Zahi Hawass is one who does this, right? They argue that, the ancient Egyptians did not have slaves. The slaves did not build the pyramids. They were they were workers, and they were paid in the form of bread and beer, you know. So they actually were hired, I guess,
but
in order to do this.
hasn't his story changed over time, though? Because
Yeah,
I specifically remember watching the History Channel, as I'm sure all of us did when we were growing up,
yeah,
and I'm talking about like pre Ancient Aliens and Da Vinci Code, History Channel, like when History Channel was still really, really good. And
yeah.
I remember that they used to do a lot of like documentaries about ancient Egypt, and he was an anchor of every single one of those. And I remember how he would be really. I remember very early on him being really, really into the slave narrative.
Hmm.
Then moving on, saying, well, we've had new discoveries, and we don't think that they were slaves. We think that they were actually skilled laborers.
Hmm.
And then him talking about, well, we think that that they use this pulley system and everything,
Yeah,
and then
yeah, yeah.
that didn't quite pan out when when
Right.
when they actually tested it. and
Yeah,
then and then he came up with this idea of like that they were like sliding them, that they were sliding the
yeah,
stones up and
yeah,
down
and
things, and like, yeah, I
yeah,
mean, and the thing is, eventually it starts to sound like a cartoon. Yeah, like they're,
yeah. Well,
like, yeah,
yeah, there was another theory, uh, that the pyramids have been, and I think this is around the same time that, all of the controversy about how the pyramids were made. There was another idea that the pyramids were constructed by using a waterway system. You guys remember
yes,
that?
yep.
That they were taking these blocks from these, faraway areas where
The
the
quarries, and,
stones.
and they
Yeah,
still have the quarry, and they know exactly where the limestone came from that they made the pyramids out of,
right, right.
right?
Yeah, and they were taking, and I guess they were creating these waterways, that allowed them to, move these big pillars and stuff like that. And they had hydraulics and stuff, that they would fill the water up, and it would help, right, and then they had a buoy system or something like that, and these inflated balloons that would lift the stones, elevate the stones up all the way to the top, and then they could roll them, roll them
Yeah,
and put them into place, and stuff like that. So Yeah, I mean,
So
yeah.
I guess so. My question would be, what if the way that you perceive history, um, here, let me think of how to word this. The parameters by which you perceive history are the parameters by which you will perceive your own life, are the parameters by which you will perceive your own reality. So, it seems to me that with this whole with the whole modern Egyptology thing, where they want to put everybody in the materialist box, and they want to say everything is based upon whatever current evidence we have right now, and the parameters that we're limited to are within the realm of technology that we currently have, but probably more primitive, because obviously history, or because obviously technology grows more complex and more efficient over time. That's one of their fundamental assumptions. um so what they'll say is that that uh that we would just assume that the Egyptians were using technology like what we have access to today, but more primitive. But where does that assumption come from? And what I would argue is the assumption that technology steadily improves over time, and then the constraint of materialism, saying that basically all there is to this whole thing around us, it's just the material stuff, that there's nothing beyond what you can actually touch and feel. And you see that among historians, you see that among archaeologists especially. But what that does, it limits your purview. So when the people that control um the acceptable thought parameters that we're allowed to think within, what they do is they go back to ancient history, and they tell us you have to stay in this box whenever you're thinking about it. You're not allowed to think about the biblical flood, because that did not happen. You're not allowed to think about ancient civilizations that we have no knowledge of, because that didn't happen. And the reason that they would say those didn't happen is that they want you to only look at the material evidence that they're showing you. They don't want you to, like, until the Egyptologists, like that, what was that guy's name? Hawass.
Zahi Hawass, yeah.
Yeah. Until he is able to get ahead of this whole narrative of the
Yeah.
structures underneath the pyramids, and he's able to somehow incorporate this into how these 2 kilometer structures were slid down a pulley system, and they used
Yeah.
a hydraulic lock system and everything to get these things in place.
Yeah.
And they use like humans to drill and goats and stuff to
Mm.
drill 2 kilometers down, until he's come up with a whole narrative to try to accommodate this stuff to his view of what happened back then. My guess is he's not even going to address this stuff,
It's kind of
Well,
like
you
the
know
because
shroud
what?
of
I don't.
what I
I
think
no
this
no.
gets
Hold
down to
up.
the core
He,
of.
he he is going to address it, and you want to know why?
Why?
Because he's coming here to do a tour throughout the United States in around between April and August or something like that. And I bet you, somebody in the audience is gonna bring that up.
course.
Well,
Everybody
well,
Now
and
knows.
they're
and,
not
and
they're
you know
not gonna
what?
record it. They're not gonna record it, but
He
somebody's gonna
he
interrupt
will
that.
probably promulgate the official party line, though. You know
Yeah,
what? Whenever he's here,
yeah.
in fact, he and a bunch of those Egyptologists over there, they're all probably coming up, crafting a whole new narrative. And
Isn't
the
it
only reason I
interesting?
say this is that this is all religious,
Mm.
Isn't it
and
interesting how the ancient, civilization crowd is also perceived by most Christians as anti-Christian too, just like the materialist materialist view of history. Like
yeah,
both sides are like the average Christian typically perceives them as threats against Christianity. Have you noticed that?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yes.
So
Hmm.
you're not really out of the boat either way, are you, Shane? Really? On one hand, you've
Well,
got the ones that say material is always going up, which is in some ways a kind of Christian concept because Christians are the idea that, the Bible begins a garden and it ends in a city. So there's something to build. And then you have but they do tend to be more materialistic. And then you have the other ones who are like, the ones that are a little bit more open to wild reinterpretation of history with the Randall Carson type stuff. And that is offensive to some Christians because, again, it messes up either their timeline or the concept that God would do great technologies long, long ago and then leave us kind of barren for so long. He just kind of disrupts. But then there's also a popular strain of Christians that fit that thing in with the Nephilim thing and all that,
Yep.
right? The
Yep.
little
Yep.
Nephilims
mhm.
running around doing
Enoch, the
stuff, the
Nephilim. Yep.
giants,
Yep.
so
Yep.
that's more
Yep.
like conspiracy young Christians, but there's some
Yep.
older ones too, but the
Yeah.
online Christian conspiracy kind of people. And
Yep.
then they have the ones that try to fit that into before the flood and all that with the Nephilim, Genesis 6.
Hmm.
But typically, a lot of Christians interpret this fascination with ancient alien technology as an attack on Christians too. So,
Hmm.
which way is it, Shane? I mean, you're saying that guy's the materialist party line, but isn't that already breaking apart and going into this new narrative where we're supposed to believe that magic does exist, but there's another explanation for it other than Christian assumptions, right?
Well, unfortunately, I think growing up in this culture, I think it's really hard not to absorb uh the party line of atheism and materialism and Darwinism and all these kinds of wicked isms, um to absorb the for Christians to absorb these things as their their kind of like default settings, because the average Christian growing up in America grew up going to public school like all of us did. And so if you're fortunate enough to go to church every Sunday, you're going to go to your, if you're a little kid, you're going to go to your Sunday school, you're going to hear a sermon, a church sermon, you're going to have the church service you're going to go to, and you're going to hear about, you're going to hear stories from the Bible. You're going to hear stories from Christian history and everything. But there's this unspoken agreement that 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 your religious mind is to be separate from like the material mind, and that the material mind, or like the material part of yourself, that is supposed to be up to the experts, like the scientists and the anthropologists and the historians and everybody like that. And Christians are just supposed to drop out of of um of the world of academia. Christians are supposed to drop out of these worlds of forming and articulating um uh opinions and hypotheses that are based upon evidence, and that are falsifiable. You know, there's this whole idea that like that Christians shouldn't really have anything to do with the world, that the world will just keep going on the way it will, and that Christians are just supposed that we're supposed to keep our religion private, and we're just supposed to keep it in our little in our little God box, and you don't bring anything from inside of the God box outside of it. But the um I just lost my train of thought. David, what was it that I was responding to?
The two different moves are both considered a kind of a challenges to Christianity.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, so the direction that I was going with it is that Christians, all Christians in the West, have internalized atheism and materialism. It's only a question of how much have they internalized it.
Mhm.
You know, and what I would argue is that this atheism and materialism and everything, it was definitely ascendant post Enlightenment, but it was really crowned as being the the preeminent default setting of the West after World War II.
Mhm.
But fortunately, I think all of that is cracking up now. You know, and that's a really popular thing to that's a really popular thing to say now, that the whole post World War II consensus that's all falling apart. And I think that's absolutely true. And I think that's the reason that you have your Randall Carlsons, and among a lot of Christians, you have a lot of them that are looking into like the Nephilim and the Book of Enoch and all that. That's the reason that like the ancient alien stuff is also popular on the History Channel, is because there's like a growing cultural zeitgeist where people are saying, this whole post World War II thing that made so much sense in like 1966, it doesn't explain everything, and it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense now. And
Mhm.
and now we are far enough away from the whole from the founding moment of the post World War II consensus, which is World War II. Now we're far enough away from that we can say, well, you know what? Maybe that was all fine and dandy back then, but it really doesn't mean much to us now. We're okay taking that post World War II consensus and putting it under the microscope and trying to falsify that, and see if that thing can really stand up against testing. You know?
It's interesting. We did a show on the Shroud of Turin recently, with Robert Rucker, who's a nuclear engineer, and we had Dr. Yu, a physicist, and
Mm,
Dr. Max Zamolov and Midachev, who's a nuclear scientist himself. And it was an interesting discussion where he presented his findings of the char marks on the shroud, and it's fascinating, how there's
yeah.
so much data there. And
Well, and
Joe Rogan just recently tweeted out a link to a guy, Dr. John and man, I can't remember his name, John Campbell, or who is a guy on YouTube who's talking about the evidence of the shroud.
Mhm.
mm,
So it's interesting how it's always aliens, Egypt, pyramids, Shroud of Turin,
Mhm.
Bigfoot. It always goes back to those same ones, doesn't it?
Ark of the Covenant. Where's
Since
the
the
Ark?
night,
yeah.
since the
Where's the
80s,
Ark of the
yeah.
Covenant?
Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
hasn't. It needs a new Hollywood movie to give it some attention, right? The Holy Grail,
yeah.
the
Real.
now JFK files. Now it's become. What? I got to ask you while I have you, Shane. You're a big Kennedy fan since you're a Kennedy,
Mhm.
and you've always been obsessed. By the way, I'm supposed to. I've been asked to interview, invited to interview somebody who is former uh, girlfriend of Lee Harvey Oswald. And I don't know if you'd like to be. Oh, look how happy Shane's face got. He got excited. Would you like to be a part of that?
I
Shane?
would love to.
Did you see Shane's face? Did you see Shane's face?
Well, in fact, if it's the person, if it's the person that I think you're
uh,
if we're thinking of the same person, I have her book and I've read it.
what's it called? And who is it? I
Well,
don't
it's
know.
it's
I wrote down the
it
name, but it'll remind. I can look for it and see.
Judith Very Baker.
Yep. Is that the one you know?
Yeah, I don't know her, but I've read her book, and then
Is
I've
it a
also
good book? Did you like it?
it was fantastic.
Would you like to be on the interview?
Dang got pumped,
Yes.
boy.
Hey, got excited.
Yeah, well, David, listen, I'll tell you this. I probably won't say much. I'll just want to sit and listen to you guys talk. Yeah,
Oh, I'm
I'll.
gonna let you talk because I don't know much about the subject, but I know you've been studying the Kennedy files because you've lived up to your name, Shane Kennedy.
Well,
What's your
so,
takeaway about all that, man? It's all these 80,000 documents. Sorry,
um,
sorry to change subjects, but I gotta have that topic while we're talking about pyramids, Shroud of Turin. It's this classic 80s and 90s late night television.
yeah, It's pretty much the lineup on the History Channel after dark. You know.
Or better yet, the Coast to Coast AM, right?
Hmm.
Yes.
So Shane,
Oh,
what
the
did you?
Coast to Coast AM. That was the original.
Yeah.
Um.
By the way, when I was going through recently the high desert of New Mexico on my way to Roswell, I had to put on the
Oh,
Coast to Coast theme song
yes.
while I was flying through it in the midnight hour. I mean, it was like I was like, man, this is so fun. Recently
Yeah.
I was on a trip, a little road trip. I said, wow, this is so cool. And we stopped by a McDonald's with the UFO on in Roswell. That, by the way, I know I'm going on a tangent, but God, man, I went to that Roswell museum.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it's so depressing. I mean, so many people got killed, you
Mm.
know? I mean, first of all, the thing about the Roswell Museum that's fascinating, you go into this town and you go in and they've got this little library, and it's got every alien related book you could ever imagine, from childhood interest to a fiction to craziest history stuff, Enoch and Nephilim and all that, everything in between, every abduction book. And it's all stuck in the 90s. Like their heyday was like 2000s and the 90s. They were like running lots of tourists over there. It's a little slumpy now, uh, but anyways, man, you go into the museum of the Roswell thing and you just see person after person killed, like that were eyewitnesses to whatever they saw. Just like, one goes into a nursing home and she's a young, like a middle-aged lady and she dies. And so many people just dead. And you're like, wow, something going on here. But
Well, it kind of makes me think of the people that Shannon said they would bury with the pharaohs.
yeah, yeah, good
Like
point. Yeah.
they knew too much and they didn't want getting out. They didn't want for those people to like demystify the pharaohs or the Chinese emperor or something, so
Sometimes,
they would just bury them along with them. And it's
all these stories, and I'm sorry to go on a tangent, but I just had to say that all these stories, it just reminds me sometimes my friend Owen Whitman, who's been on our show a lot of times over the years,
Mhm.
he always said, a statement. I think Darwin, he kind of paraphrases Darwin as saying, if there is a God, he must be a predator, stay away from him because the universe exhibits all kinds of very violent, uncaring, predatorial patterns, right? And you think about it, and you think about all these people who, like, what is it like to be the lady who dies because you were at the Roswell incident? What was your purpose driven life, according to Rick Warren? God's got a plan for you. You're going to get freaking murdered because you saw some kind of freaking hobgoblin or whatever the hell in a
Yeah.
desert and you kept saying the truth about it. Like, shouldn't she be a saint in the church if she was speaking the truth about what hobgoblin or whatever the hell she saw in the desert and the government killed her? Isn't she a martyr for telling the truth? I mean, she saw the most extraordinary thing that's more earth shattering than anything, theoretically, if she's telling the truth and she goes to her grave doing that and she gets silenced for that. Isn't she a martyr? And
100%.
so why won't she be canonized? No one even knows her name. I went to the museum and I forgot her name. I'd have to look it up. I took a photo of it.
Well,
Where is
don't
God and all these things? In other words, it seems like it's easier to believe in the goodness of Jesus's political revolution and its impact in society than it is to believe that he is connected to the creator of things. When you have these predatory hobgoblins and things crashing into the desert, people getting murdered for it just because they said, hey, yeah, I saw something. All right, boom, you're killed. You know? I'd like to see Rick Warren write a book about her autobiography. You know? That's
you know
another thing that's depressing too about like the Christians, the Christian when you go to the Christian publishing industry and the Christian media industry, it's all these people just trying to get the next book deal. They treat Christianity like a product, like a commodity. That's the problem with this society. Is there any news site left for Christians? Is there any news site produced and curated by Christians?
Nope.
It's not
There's only
constantly
Paul, there's only
shilling for
Paula
war.
White who wants you to give
Yeah, Paula White. Yep.
Oh boy,
to her to her
$1,000.
foundation. Yeah.
Yeah, she wants you to do all the alms giving during Lent to her.
So a seed of 1,000. You know what I'm saying? And you shall be blessed 2000-fold. You know what I mean? Even Trump done got on that plane. I'm sure he done
And
passed.
Trump appointed a CDC director who's a total pharma shill and all for the vaccine
Mm,
after his first pick, David Weldon, had mild criticism about the vaccine from decades ago. And that was enough to get him to withdraw his nomination and stay out of it. And instead, he just, did you see his pick? It's Susan Menarez, who is a former intelligence Department of Health, and she's a big advocate of the vaccines. And
mm,
Susan Menarez, she's going to be the CDC pick for Trump, and that's in place of David Weldon, who had mild criticisms of the vaccine. And this is after, Trump also allowed Danny Davis, Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis, who's been on my show many times. He withdrew his pick. He didn't even need to be Senate confirmed for being underneath Tulsi Gabbard's DNI office as an assistant, because he had criticism about our foreign policy with Israel and Syria or whatever. So Trump's turning out
Jeez.
to be a bit of a failure right now in terms of his living up to the second chance that God gave him. But that just goes to show that we have free will, and
Right.
just because God saves your life doesn't mean you're on autopilot hero. You can still be a fool, and we don't understand, of course, the narrative that he has to hear or whatever, but that's no excuse. All we have to do is tell the truth. We cannot support liars who want to recommend dangerous, violent products for children when they don't even need it. I mean, it's a disgrace.
Yeah.
And, but what do you think about the JFK file release, Shane? I got to get your take on that. And Judith is going to want to
It
talk
doesn't
to
really
you.
seem like a whole lot of it seems like so the thing that makes me the thing that kind of raised my eyebrow with it was I remember the night that it dropped, just kind of like going on Twitter, going on Google, and just kind of like searching, and also going to the National Archives website and just kind of like doing like little like word searches through it,
Mhm.
and just thinking, this is it, you know, this, this is the stuff that they've said would compromise national security
Yeah,
since the 1960s. If they were to release it, like this is it.
yeah.
So at least in my mind, the question it raised was either one, uh, the real indicting documents were destroyed, which I think is probably the case, because we're not dealing with dummies up in the government.
No, no.
They're not going to
Accidentally.
preserve a piece of paper that says that says we had a CIA squad of snipers positioned on this building and this building, and at this moment, we fired on and killed the sitting president. These are the photographs, and this is the actual video footage of it. That that stuff is all going to get destroyed. Look at what they did with USAID.
Hmm.
Remember the way that USAID, the minute that they found out that Trump was defunding them, the first order that they made was to start burning documents.
Hmm.
So I guess my point is, if they're going to do that at USAID, which we pretty much know a lot of the horrible things that USAID has done around the world and all the wasting of money and everything, but the government killing or being complicit in the killing of the sitting president, that's a much bigger deal than funding studies into like trans frogs in the Congo or something like that. Like those are worlds apart as far as like
But that money for trans frogs was probably going to kill the president of Congo or something at the time too.
yeah, you know what, you're probably right, and I'm sure RFK Jr. would have something to say about that, but the no, I think it's
By the way, would RFK Jr. tell Israel to get rid of their seed oils?
no, you know what? If BB were to show up to RFK Jr.'s office and tell him, no, I want you to keep the seed oils and I want for you to promote them, RFK Jr. would probably do it. I would hope he wouldn't, but I'm just being facetious. But I find it interesting that these files, though, there just seems to really be nothing there, and the question is, well, why do they keep them secret for this long? And at the end, and also, like, big picture, I think that is a bigger conversation that we have to have, is if people overclassify documents in the government, then should that be criminal? And I think it should be. You
And
know,
who's going to enforce that criminal charge when you have a criminal government?
well, maybe if you're someone in the government who does have a security clearance, and you find that a document or a swath of documents are overclassified, or you suspect that they're overclassified, maybe there should be a reward or an incentive put in place for you to whistleblow that to a congressional committee or something, or
Mhm.
maybe there should be like a some kind of a board in the like a trans intelligence board or something like that, where
Mhm.
those people could whistleblow. Like, what they could do is go to the public and say, hey, I'm letting you know that I have submitted a whistleblower report about documents that I have identified that are classified, that I believe are overclassified, and I have submitted, and obviously I can't publicly say what the documents are or what they're about to the public, but
Mhm.
I'm just letting you know that I have filed it with this board, and then they're going to adjudicate it.
Mhm.
And then if the board ends up finding
And you know what
what,
that person's about to be? The next dude that came out of Australia. What's that dude's name? Who had to
who,
stay in house arrest for like years?
oh, Julian
That's,
Assange.
yeah, that's he's
Well,
about to be the next Julian Assange, bro.
that's the reason. What I would say they need to do is go out in public, or just publicly file and say I'm not suicidal. I love my life, and I am, and because I'm a patriot, I'm filing a whistleblowing report. I'm not disclosing any information that is classified, but
Mhm.
I believe that the documents I have submitted to be reviewed have been overclassified. And then let's say it does turn out that they were overclassified, then I think they ought to be provided with some kind of a financial reward. And then what we should do is prosecute the people that overclassified it.
They might already be dead though.
Maybe, but the thing is, what you do is you make an example out of the people that overclassify documents, because the thing is, if we really want to talk about preserving democracy, if we really want to talk about making democracy work and everything, you can't have one class of people that are allowed to just classify anything that they want to prevent them from being absorbed into some kind of public scandal, and
Mhm.
then you have the underclass of everybody else who can't.
Yeah.
You cannot say that you are a democratic society, and that be the case.
Mhm.
You know.
We're not a democratic society.
Right. No, no, no. And I agree with you on that. But the thing I'm saying is, I find it ironic that the same people that are talking about how we should all be equal, how we should all be this should be one big egalitarian democratic society and everything, and we're all the same, we're all equal. The government is us. We are the government and all this. Those are the same people who love to have this super state that that is allowed to basically make anything a state secret that they want, and then they can preserve that state secret as long as they want. And then if anybody raises a question about their ability to classify this or to classify that, then you would think that our country had just been attacked by a foreign government. You would think that it was that Pearl Harbor had just happened again, or the Gulf of Tonkin had just happened again, or something like that. You know,
Mhm.
so we have to have accountability to the people that are in charge of things. And I don't agree with this system at all. My preference would be that we didn't have an intelligence agency, that we didn't have all these clandestine operations all over the world. And that's what we have to work toward long term, in my opinion. But I think we have to have a series of real checks and balances built in to the intelligence apparatus that exists today. And I don't know what that would look like, but the one thing that I think would work is to provide a financial incentive for people to whistle blow, or to blow the whistle on overclassified documents. I think that would be a start, because
Mm-hmm.
the more the ability of the public to chip away at this whole regime of classified secrets and everything, um that that is one excellent way to start chipping away at the overreach of the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the only way, but it's certainly one.
What do you guys think? I know both of you take pride in localism in your own area. What do you think is the future of localism in our environment today, over the next 10 years or 20 years?
I don't know. I mean, um, that's hard to say.
Culturally and politically and economically, do you think things are, I remember Shane, you were talking about how like Hollywood would be decentralized eventually, and
Mm-hmm.
entertainment and music would be decentralized eventually. And remember back in 2012 and all that, it was really popular politically to think about, localism. The answer to globalism is localism. I remember B.J. Lawson used to say that. He was a guy that ran for Congress in North Carolina, like Ron Paul type philosophy. Um, and then you had Tom Wood's book, which was popular bestseller at the time, I think, Nullification, which was about how to nullify bad federal law at the state level. All that was really popular back during the Tea Party era.
Yeah.
And you don't hear about it as much now. I mean, it's still there, and there's all these perennial groups that are doing stuff on
Ain't
the
My
margin.
America by Bill Kaufman.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was just looking up Bill Kaufman. I couldn't find anything by him. I think he kind of jumped into, he got off the public limelight. But what do you think of localism? How it's going to interact with this? Because look, this Trump thing is look, it's such an exercise in futility, because if you're going to have 20 criminal investigations and survive death and be as crazy and wild thinking as Trump is, and you're still going to be a total subservient guy to status quo foreign policy and status quo CDC poisons and status quo crap and status quo USD after you just got that once in a lifetime mandate. It's demoralizing, because JD's not going to get that. Even if I like JD, even if JD has a better philosophy governing wise than Trump, he's not going to come in with the level of massive buy-in culturally, I think, that Trump would have. He doesn't have that. He's not got the gravitas. I mean, he can always get it maybe eventually, but I don't think so. He don't have that quirky humor like Trump's railing about his portrait, how ugly it looks in Colorado's government office the other day. I mean, that's what makes Trump so fun and crazy and wild. But to have all of that and to still just take all that charisma and goodwill and people giving you second chances and God giving you a second chance, and loading up trash for CDC, trash for foreign policy, trash, 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 USDA trash, murdering chickens by the millions, stupid trash idiocy. And this dude talks a big game, this big Trump game. Oh, I'm going to fix it. You're not against anything, man. After all that, you win the popular vote. You don't want to go, he really wants to get that stupid attaboy. And that's pathetic, right? Because that's not
Yeah.
what a real man does. A real man has to lay it all on the field, but he don't want to. And so, maybe his story is still to be continued, but it is a demoralizing thing, because I had sub-zero expectation for politics, and he still found a way to disappoint me dramatically. I'm tired of us co-signing on to this stupid pagan killing of people in the Middle East,
But that's
I watched Steve.
that's
I tell you,
politics,
man, I
man.
almost I saw Steve Witkoff on Tucker Carlson show,
I saw that too.
and he said, we just need to put some finance in that region. And I said, thank you for saying it out loud because you're a novice what this whole thing's about.
Yeah.
Iran needs to be brought to heel financially. It needs to have the banks and the whole dollar SWIFT system firmly in control of Iran. He said, we
They
just
just
you
have to embrace
imagine.
usury, David. That's
He
all they have
said
to do.
he said that on Tucker's show. He said, can you imagine the business potential here in the region with Qatar and what Palestine could be and these players and then Iran, what we could do if we brought finance to the region. And I thought, God, that's the whole thing, isn't it? You just said the quiet part out loud, didn't you? The finance, huh? That's what we got to do all this for. It's just, and this is the best of the America First. I mean, I don't see his bench having the gravitas to pull off the kind of energy that Trump has pulled off. I see a lot of whimpering cowards. I mean, they just don't have that fortitude that he has. So you got Mr. Fortitude, and this is the result. It's extremely demoralizing, And
I think what
and
it
I
is
don't
for
care
you,
about politics. I'm a
I think
political
what it,
atheist, and I'm still demoralized about a
I
God I don't
think
even.
what it, but I think what it is for you is a thing of, you know, we all sort of fell into this uh euphoria or sense of romanticism around the political arena when Trump was, when the whole election thing was going on. You see what I'm saying? So we all had that
Yeah, you get
sort of,
bedazzled by the spell of
yeah,
all. Yeah,
yeah, we all had that sort of romantic lie or
yeah.
whatever, you know what I mean? That
It's
bedazzled, whatever.
mimetically hypnotic. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But it was like real life was hypnotic. How does the man dodge death? How does the man beat all the prisons? And you're like, okay, now you've been given a mandate. Now's your chance to govern actually godly with
Hmm.
courage. What do you have to fear?
Hmm.
Well, apparently a lot because he's just
But
turning into John McCain again. Here we go again.
he could have, well, he could have first started with the whole thing of like, this is something that I think me and Shane talked about even before Trump got in office. And this was the whole thing about, I think I called it something like Trump's Jubilee moment,
Yeah.
in the sense that when he gets into office, he has an opportunity to sort of do the Christian thing, which is to forgive those who are persecuting him, or or do the opposite. You know what I mean? Go after the people that were persecuting him. So, that I think that goes in tandem with this whole thing of like, are you really going to change? Was he really going to shift gears and change things around, or was it going to be sort of the status quo? And that's not to say that I don't. I think some of the things that he has done, you know, it has shook the system. You know what I mean? I mean, getting rid of the Department of Education, sticking with that. I don't necessarily know how that's going to work out in each state
But the shaking
because
he's doing, yeah, the shaking he's doing is like a dog jumping on top of the pyramid at the top of it, and what it's doing to the foundation is nothing.
yeah, yeah,
It's
because
nothing.
if you think about like, okay, yeah, you say, well, education should go back to the states. Well, there are states that are going to make it even worse
Yeah.
for the people that are that are in those
Yeah,
states.
I still can't imagine. I can't fathom how anybody would want to send their kids to the average government school today.
Hmm.
I can't even understand how that's not rejected by at least 60% of the population. Like the fact that that is still so mimetically a thing, I am just baffled by. I'm like, after all of this, what do they have to do
Yeah.
to
I
torture
don't
your
think I don't
children
think
before your stupid, like, paralyzing, mimetic, hive mind idiocy
mhm.
snaps?
Yeah.
And you at least put them into a private school or something. But to
Yeah.
put them in these stupid trash schools
Yeah.
after
And so
all of this, the code
so
stuff, the nutcase stuff, the ideology from USAID, all this trash,
mhm.
it's like, God, man, America deserves
Yeah.
what it's going to get, man. It
So
deserves.
so so
Now
so
the
okay,
kids don't
with
deserve it. The
that.
kids don't
Yeah.
deserve colon cancer.
So
That
so
these
with
Right.
that.
idiots. If
Yeah.
Kennedy would stop talking about Israel every day of his Twitter page and actually get the canola oil out of the kids' food supply, we could stop colon cancer for kids.
Yeah.
But these guys are just sitting over there genuflecting like bitches
Yeah.
24/7. And this is the best America First could do. What a whimpering piece of shit.
Yeah.
What a whimpering piece of shit.
So
And then you look at
I don't
conservative.
think
Sorry, bro. All right, go
I
ahead.
don't I don't think that
This
I don't
stupid
think
thing
that
keeps I'm trying to. I don't even care about fixing anymore. I like being
because
blown.
you're getting heated up, because you're getting heated up, it's getting foggy, David.
That's not
No.
foggy.
So, so,
I wish it was fog.
so
It's
the
just
thing
it's just
is that
like
going back to your whole thing about talking about education, right? I don't think that people who are I don't think parents necessarily want to send their kids to public schools. It's just that the state that they're in,
Yeah.
the politicians that are here, they have if you're going to give the decision to the states, who's going to snatch at that first? It's going to be the politicians who are going to snatch it, squeeze it, and say, okay, we're good. If we're going to take control, then we're really going to have control. So, these coastal states, they're going to say, well, we're not giving any funding, and we're not going to allow for people to choose where they send their kids to school. We're gonna force it to
Mhm,
where even more to where people have to choose public schools,
mhm,
right? But on the flip side, what the state is doing, with Trump, you said, well, you're not gonna get no state funding. That might force these states to reconsider some of their viewpoints. You know what I'm saying? Like this whole thing of the transgender thing. You know what I'm saying? You look at you know, I think what was that state? Maine or something like that.
Maine. Yep.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And the lady was like, well, we'll see you in court and stuff like that.
And he's like,
And
I will see you in court.
right,
He's like, I will
and
see
that
you
and
in court.
that
I will see you in court.
but that thing flipped. You know what I'm saying? It flipped in a matter of weeks. You know what I'm saying? Because they realized they weren't going to get no funding. You know what I mean? So you
I
know,
just think, yeah, I just think I don't understand how you can send your kid to government school, man. I don't know what excuse people always got a million excuses, but God, man, just basic,
yeah,
just like to get,
Well, and that's the thing.
Americans don't understand what time it is. They don't get it, man. They think it's about Agenda 2030. I mean that that's probably the smallest problem on the horizon here. You just like the existential issues are not going to survive, which is probably going to be predated by this agenda crap or whatever. But you know what I mean? Like that Shane, people are not being raised. People are being raised by wolves at a level we've
Right.
never seen, and it's catastrophic. The seed oils, everything is literally driving insane rates of colon cancer for 10-year-olds, 8-year-olds, man, cancers and obesity. This is not sustainable. What will those people be like when they're 50, man? If they're aging out at 8 years old in their digestive tract at 8 because of what we're doing, what's that going to be like when they're the grandparents, and who's supporting them, right? And what level of health and like catastrophe are we dealing with?
Well, by that time, the average age in America will probably be like 47 or something, because
Yeah.
I
That's
think in
going to be in our lifetime,
1970.
apparently.
Yes. Well,
We don't
in
understand the catastrophe we're headed towards.
right.
Unless, I mean, I'm not saying it's over, but nobody's awake, man. You look at these conservative movements, they either always spiral off into the most crazy, like, it's always about the nanobot graphene, but it's exhausting. They're
Yeah.
either chasing after the most obscure thing that maybe is part of it, but there's just no organization.
yeah, the obscure
Well,
thing like coils underneath the pyramids.
well, let me say this though. I think there's a big difference between different generations, and a lot of that has to do with the world in which they were raised under, like what the cultural constellation was at the time. And in 1970, the average age in America was something like, I think it was like 19 years old. It was like 19 years old, or maybe it was 20. The average age in America today is like 36. And in, I think it's like 20 or 30 years, the average age in America, it's going to be in the 40s. So we are witnessing an America that's getting older, and an America that gets a lot older, it's going to be less productive, right? We're going to have a smaller cohort of young people to take care of all the old people.
Yeah, women,
And
and then the men have no incentive and the women have no incentive to get married.
right.
So it's all just rapidly unraveling, man. Give it another 5 years of cooking in this direction. It's going to get worse and worse and worse at this point. And you
Now,
got these
It's
stupid
going to end up
conservative
like
groups,
it's going to end up like Japan.
worse,
yeah, I think it'll
way
be worse
worse,
in Japan, man.
Mm, mm.
way worse.
But
But yeah,
the thing I'll say is this: is that I think deep within the millennial soul, and look, you like you guys, I have a lot of friends that I disagree with at a very, very deep level, politically, religiously, and everything. And then I have family members that are boomers that I disagree with at a very, very deep level. And the argument that I notice most boomers will use against like Christianity and against and against like downsizing government and being pro-localist and stuff, the argument against those things that most boomers will use is they'll say, well, you know, um I don't buy into the idea that I have any responsibility to anybody else. I'm just here to have a good time, baby. That's all I'm here to do. And then for millennials, on the other hand, I think deep within the millennial soul is a yearning to know what good is. I really do believe that. Like your most radical, take AOC for instance. Your most radical, like, crazy AOC. As authoritarian and wild as she is, I do think that I think deep down there is a yearning to do what is right.
who,
Like I
who?
that for somebody like AOC,
Oh, okay.
that she legitimately wants to do good,
I don't think so.
but well, I don't like her either.
I don't know. I
But
don't think
but
she genuinely wants to do good.
no, David, listen. I think that deep down in her soul she wants to do good, but she's embraced the whole like might makes right and authoritarian thing. And she looks at people that are homeless, and she looks at people that don't have access to a doctor and stuff, and she's like, well, the only way to solve that problem that I know of that's been passed on to me through the university I went to and everything, the only means of taking care of these people is at the point of a gun.
Yeah.
Is to go and take wealth from this person over here and hire a bunch of government bureaucrats and set up this multi-billion-dollar homeless housing project or something, and you set up this massive apparatus to take care of the homeless problem, and it only makes the homeless problem worse. And then so the only thing I'm saying is that I think a lot of millennials do, even people that the three of us will viscerally disagree with, I think that they're coming to the table from the point of view that they want to do what is right. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, at a structural level,
Yeah. It's
they don't understand how doing something good via authoritarian means is still wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I see what you're saying, because
at their core, they don't have a sense of community. They don't understand that these types of things need to be handled through the community, taking care of the homeless, taking care of sick people, of sick family members and everything. That's got to be taken care of through the community. Unfortunately, the world that millennials were handed was one where community was essentially slaughtered by the generations that preceded us.
Didn't Trump
And I'm not endorsing AOC, by the way.
Didn't Trump get the majority of millennial and Gen Z votes or something?
Except for white liberal or white college educated women.
But like he won the majority of millennials and Gen Z, though, didn't he?
Right. I think the only demographics that he did not gain much with, which he still gained with, were
I think he won though.
Were white college educated women.
But I think he actually won the majority of millennials and Gen Z, which is something Republicans had never done at
Yes.
the time. So
Yeah.
that was,
But I
he's very
want to,
authoritarian the way he
yeah,
acts.
I want to take it back to what Shane was saying though, because
Yeah.
if you think about it, right, like we've talked about this amongst ourselves before, with this whole thing of, liberals and people who sort of have a almost like a foundational socialist view, a communist view or whatever. We've talked about how this idea that communism or socialism, has its roots in sort of the enlightenment too, or it has a gospel component
Mm-hmm.
to it, the same way that sort of capitalism does as well. It's just, I think that the communist or socialist frame framework has has been distorted. You know what I mean? It is it turns into sort of a like a hatred. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you talk about like Star Wars and Darth, you got Darth Vader. Well, Darth Vader was first. What was his name? Before
Anakin
he became,
Skywalker,
he
or
was Anakin Skywalker, right? So he came up with, the right way. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Being a Jedi or whatever, right? But something happened, right? He lost his wife or the person that he loved or whatever, or something like that. I think the story goes, and then, whatever. And then he went down this sort of tragic road where he now thinks that what he's doing, creating the, for the empire or whatever, or for the republic, is good for humanity. It's good for the galaxy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so I think, and I'm not trying to liken AOC or anybody else to Darth Vader, but I'm just saying, they both sides have good, they mean well, right? But the outcomes tend to be, you know, um, it doesn't turn out the same way that I think maybe they're thinking of it, right? Because what happens in communist states is that the state takes over, and then that leads to more violence, right? You think about Russia and China,
Yeah.
all those people dead, you know, even though maybe their 5-year program that they had in mind, Stalin had in mind, or, whatever, he thought he was doing a good thing, maybe, you know what I'm saying? So,
Well, and I think that conservatives today, which we've all talked about how much we all really dislike that word.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, Unfortunately, I think that conservatives today are not really articulating anything. They're just like articulating like we're just going to shrink the government. We're just going to destroy the government. Well, or not destroy the government. We're going to rein it in. We're going to get rid of all the waste. We're going to combat government overreach and everything, and bring it back into the box that the Constitution lays out for it, which is what we should be doing. But at the same time, I don't think we are proposing the. We're not articulating a vision for the future. And when I say we, I'm not talking about us, because we always talk about a vision for the future. But most like the conservatives that have large platforms, they're just going out and saying we're going to take out the Department of Education. We're going to shrink the Pentagon. We're going to shrink this. We're going to shrink that and everything. All things that I disagree with, that need to have happened, that should have happened yesterday. You know, but the thing is, what are we? What the ultimately the question is, why are we doing it? Are we saying that we're going to do it to save money? Are we saying that we're going to do it to keep some people out of jail? Are we saying that we're going to do it for this or that? Well, those would all be good reasons to save money, to keep people out of jail, for justice, whatever. But we should be saying that the reason we want to get rid of these things is because they're getting in the way of the way things ought to be. You know, the world that you should identify yourself as existing within is not America, whose head is DC, you should perceive yourself as being a fish swimming in the aquarium of your local community, whether that is your local church, your local city council, extended family that live around you, friends, and you have multiple layers to that. But I think what we need to do is articulate that as being the vision.
Do you think millennials and Gen Z, as they get older, are gonna resurge localism, or do you don't think it's gonna look like that?
I
Are they
think
on
so.
track to do that? How are they
Yeah.
going? How's that going to look? And
Well,
what will be the tipping point to make them do that? Because they're very national oriented.
what I think is interesting, I think there's a big bifurcation among millennials and Gen Z where they're either hyper nationalist or they're not, and then it's interesting because most boomers kind of tend toward an average of being like where it's just very very muddled language where they say that they're first and foremost an American and love the country and everything, but they also love their local community too. It's like a very very confusing thing because remember the kind of the cultural constellation, like the societal constellation that the boomers were born into and grew up in, they still had a semblance of local community right around them. They still had functional churches, they still had functional local public schools, they still had a functional community that had a pecking order and that had a hierarchy where and it wasn't perfect. I'm not trying to make it sound like it was chocolate rivers and lollipop fields or anything, but they grew up in a world where the local community had authority and it was functional, not perfect but functional. Today when we look at our local communities, they've been hollowed out. The
Yeah.
the jobs that pay decently well were all exported overseas. Drugs were brought into those communities and starting in like the 60s and 70s,
Mhm.
probably by our CIA, but we don't really know that as a concrete fact, but probably. Um, it almost seems like there was a big war by the big guys in the national government against the local government, against the local, I'm not going to say local governments, but against like power centers within local communities, and the national consolidated power center won. And so now what we need to do, I think, is start fighting for, and I'm not advocating for violence. I'm saying like verbally fight, like win the war of ideas. We need to start fighting for there to be local nodal power centers again in our churches and civic organizations, among families, among friends. Get to know your neighbors, a
Mhm.
neighbor's choice. Go to the farmer's market, meet people at the farmer's market. That's the thing I think, man, that I think that's what millennials are starving for more than anything in the world is a sense of community. And I think in order for there to be a sense of community, I think a prerequisite is a commonly held sense of what is objectively moral. And I think that's the reason that millennials seem to be so fixated on trying to figure out what is right and what is wrong. Because when we were all growing up, the message that all of us heard through the public schools was, well, you have your truth and they have their truth, and we all just need to get along. You know? Well, now that's all festered and it's all exploding. Yeah, like we have to have a public sense of morality. And then the community, I think, and then that lays that fertilizes the soil for authentic community to grow out of that, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Well, Shannon, any final thoughts? I got to wrap it up on my end.
No, man, get, start signaling, get the pyramids. Let's get what I'm saying? Let's start signaling. Let's get them signals going. You know what I mean? And everything will be all right. Once we get in contact, we'll really know what's been going on the last 2002 years. 2000,
I wonder if anybody has shown up at the pyramids yet with a car battery and jumper cables.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
All right. Appreciate you guys. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, David.
Yeah. Thank you,
Here.
man.